Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Hi, Dave.
Hey there. How's it going?
Good.
Okay, I'm just gonna go to. So I'm just gonna go to close from my router just in case, because you never know.
Are you in Vancouver?
I am right now. Yeah, I'm in Vancouver. I have an office in Montreal, so I kind of most of the time I'm in Vancouver or on the road on a project somewhere. But yeah, right now I'm in Vancouver. Thankfully, because Montreal is not a great place to be right now.
Why's that?
It's COVID.
Oh, really?
Very high numbers, and they've had to really cinched down on things there. So I was there in February for about, gosh, probably late January into early March. So at least a good month, maybe a month and a half. And it was depressing. Like it wasn't fun. Curfew 8 p.m. Everything shut down. Really big impact economically. So like all those, have you spent much time in Montreal before?
Mhm.
Okay. So, I mean, all those cafes, all those bars, all those, terraces shut down. And, I'm a good 25% of them out of business, more and more as it went on, just you started to see for lease signs going up, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, I saw, it looked like it's kind of going off in the Arctic too, Arctic Canada,
Yeah.
cases popping up all over.
Yeah. It's sneaky, like you think you got it licked and then boom, kind of, that's what we're looking at in British Columbia now, is that we've always had a relatively good handle on it. It's kind of gone ups and downs, but when there's a lockdown, people tend to kind of, for the most part, abide by the rules. But with the variants, it seems if you just give it an inch, it just really spreads quite quickly. So we're seeing that in like Jason just commented here, Alberta residents can't come to BC now. Yeah, we're close to border to Alberta.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So are you in Alaska in Anchorage, or where are you specifically?
Anchorage.
Yeah. And how's it up there?
We got out in front on the vaccines. So, I think in rural Alaska, it's pretty high. I mean, it's definitely over 50%, maybe 60, some communities even like 80% vaccinated.
Wow. Okay.
Anchorage, maybe 50% or 40%. Then you've got a lot of people who've already had it. So we're kind of, just coasting right now, seeing what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And I think we're letting our guard down is what's happening a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
I think it's just the way this thing is, and
Yeah.
you have a virus, it's patient, it's gonna come back and haunt you.
And persistent. Like this is
Yeah.
I've got a couple of friends of mine who are virologists, and another friend of mine's father got it, and he died. And she's not a virologist, but she works in labs and so forth. And she was just saying it's vicious. I mean, he was a relatively young. I mean, in his late 60s. I mean, in the kind of in the how do you say, in the quote unquote vulnerable age bracket, he was on the younger set, right? Earlier on, this is a couple months ago, and healthy guy, worked out every day and stuff like that. And he got it, and within 5 to 8 days, he was gone. And boom. So I got vaccinated on Friday, this past Friday, AstraZeneca. So we'll see. I didn't feel like great on. I felt it. Like I didn't feel that hot on Friday, and Saturday I was kind of like, my energy was pretty low, but today I feel fine. So let's see how many people have got. Oh, we've got a good number on. So I'm going to record this for the class, if you don't mind. I'll just post it internally on our Moodle site, so we can get going. So basically, what I was hoping to kind of do with this webinar / whatever presentation is give you the chance to explain the Leo platform in a little more detail and explain what your objectives are. You kind of know how we've used it before, but if there's any new things that have come up or new features that you want to show us, and give us some pointers. So I've explained to you what we're doing with the assignment, and then the next step for this is to tweak it so it's an optimal Leo post after the assignment is done and kind of submitted back. So if that means kind of shortening things a bit and maybe making less academic or whatever, then that's what we want to do. So if we can make that happen today, within the time that we have, however long it takes, half an hour or so, or an hour, whatever, that'd be great. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. So what you should do, Dave, is just stop me when you want to do questions.
All right.
you know, and I think I can probably, I do have a PowerPoint. I was going to give you guys a little bit of a background on how this all got started
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
how we use it here in Alaska. And
Yeah.
but I also, I think in about probably five or so minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, I could show you some live stuff on the site.
Yeah. That'd be great.
But I don't want to run long, and if you let me keep, I'll just keep going.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, there's a lot of good content on there. Like, so I guess my first exposure to the platform was 4 years ago, maybe something like that. 3, 4, forget. First time I taught this course, and then I've seen more and more. It's just gotten more kind of, it's interesting. It's good. It's cool. So go for it.
Okay, well, we started talking health already, so we're not gonna really leave the health topic. We're gonna stick with health, more like One Health. And I'll explain what that term is if it's new to you guys. But thank you, Dave, for having me on. And I've been enjoying seeing your faces pop up on the Leo platform as new members are joining. And I've enjoyed seeing the stuff that Royal Road students have contributed in the past as well. So, so I thought I'd take the opportunity, tell you a little bit about, how this all started, what we're trying to accomplish, and maybe make a little bit more sense. And also, if you guys have any questions at any point, just feel free to stop me, or Dave, just kind of flag me if there's a question coming up in the chat.
All good. Yeah, I will.
So let's see if I can get this up here.
There you go.
Okay. So probably, I'm thinking a lot of you are very outdoor oriented people, and you spend a lot of time, whether it's, fishing, hiking, hunting, traveling, whatever it is. I hope you, at least I hope you do. It's super important now, especially with how much time we're spending on computers, to get out and be active and exercise. But in the north, and in other parts of the world, but in the north in particular, people live really close to the land, and they depend heavily on wild foods and wild products for medicine. And one thing that we recognized early on is there's a lot of indirect impacts that happen with climate change, and it's affecting health in a lot of different ways. And so we recognize that in order to understand human health in the north, it really helps to also pay close attention to what's happening with environmental health and animal health. And that's where this idea and this term One Health comes from. It's been around for a while. It comes out of the really veterinary sciences, but it's kind of taking off, especially in the context of climate change, as we talk more about. And it's a concept that's found a lot of traction here in Alaska and other parts around the circumpolar north, including Canada. So just a little bit about me. That's I live in Anchorage, and that's my crew. That was a couple of years ago. My eldest is now graduating from Western Washington University, and my eldest daughter is in Missoula at the University of Montana, and then I have twins that are juniors in high school, and they love hiking and skiing and fishing and all the kinds of things that we have in our backyard here in Alaska. And this is in the Chugach Mountains, which is the mountains that I'm looking out on right now. And this is near, actually, if any of you have been to Girdwood before, been to Anchorage, this is near Girdwood and Crow Pass. And this is where I work. This is, you can see the Chugach Mountains there in the background, but this is the Alaska Tribal Health Campus. And the big building right in the middle is the Alaska Native Hospital. And then all of these other buildings around it are, support buildings for clinical care, housing for people who come in from rural villages so they can get services at the hospital. We have a Center for Disease Control, Arctic infectious disease, a program here on campus. And then next door, we have University of Alaska Anchorage and Alaska Pacific University. And that's Anchorage in the background there, except it's not the downtown view, but it's kind of the backdrop there. But we have kind of a comprehensive healthcare system in Alaska because we do have this tribal health system. And so whether you're native or non-native, if you live in rural Alaska outside one of the big cities, you're going to go to a native hospital or clinic. Your water is going to be coming through the tribal health system, and your wastewater, solid waste, all that environmental health stuff. And also your public health, which we call community health here. Your community health, prevention, what makes you healthy, what are some of the key aspects of wellness, all that stuff will come through the tribal health system as well. And I work in the Division of Environmental Health and Engineering, actually, at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. And this is the cutout island look at Alaska here, which is always kind of funny to see something like that because we're not an island. We're connected to Canada. We share a lot, and our environments are connected, and our climate is connected, and more than ever, we rely upon our neighbors in Russia and in Canada to understand what's coming next, because wildlife's moving, the weather's moving, invasive species are moving. There's all kinds of things moving back and forth. But this diagram shows the tribal health system in Alaska. And these red stars are where there are hospitals. And these little towns are all of the little villages. And then the dotted lines, looks like provincial lines. Those are actually tribal health regions. And there's different tribal health organizations that run these different parts of the health system in Alaska. And some are culturally in Inupiat, some are Yupik, some are Tlingit, some are Aleut. There's all sorts of different groups, but this is kind of the organization I work for, is kind of the umbrella organization for that. I think First Nations Health Authority is probably the closest parallel that you have in BC. And we have this mission, this vision statement, and it's pretty audacious, but I want to break it down a little bit. It's Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world, which seems, when you think about how small populations are in the Arctic and how isolated communities are, seems like a really big reach. But when you also, if you think about the, the environment, and if you start off with communities, whether they're urban centers or villages that have clean air and clean water, and they have access to healthy food. And then if you can build on top of that, good healthcare system, access to early detection for disease, good treatment, and then you reduce things like behavioral related things like drugs and alcohol. There's no reason why you can't achieve that, but you got to start with a clean environment and a healthy environment. So that's what we focus on at our work here. So what happened this is a recent story, actually kind of a new, in Leo, this is a new kind of emerging type of climate change impact. We've been talking about flooding and erosion and permafrost thaw in coastal Alaska and coastal, northern parts of Canada in particular. We've been talking about that for a long time, a decade. The new kid on the block is extreme rain events, extreme snow events, rapid changes from cold to warm, and drought. And it's unbelievable to me, and it's probably unbelievable to some of you guys too, that how dry, the Pacific Northwest, BC, Southeast Alaska, how incredibly dry these places have become and how quickly they're transforming. And when it comes to threats to infrastructure and communities, I think this is one of the new players is, these landslides and flooding and these kinds of things. And then we've got, kind of in the, more of the biology, there's a lot of interesting things happening with food security and wildlife health and, what we call zoonoses or zoonotic diseases. And rabies is a great example of a zoonotic disease. That's a disease that can pass from animals to people. And what we're seeing now all across the north is zoonotic vectors for disease like ticks, like mosquitoes, even things like marine mammals that were previously isolated into different populations, now starting to merge and mingle and diseases passing, or diseases passing from the terrestrial environment, even pets like dogs, and getting into things like marine mammals. So everything's moving around. It requires surveillance. It requires as many eyes as possible. Science, remote monitoring, community members, observers, all these kinds of people. There's plenty of work for everybody pulling together so we can try to understand the problems being experienced by one community and also maybe connect the dots and try to understand emerging new threats that are happening. So I like this graphic. It gives a nice overview of climate change impacts on human health. We've been trying from the point where we first started to hear reports from residents in rural Alaska communities about really crazy things like animals they'd never seen before showing up, rain occurring in the middle of winter, just sort of temperature-related stress. When we first started hearing about that in the tribal health system, we had to ask the question, okay, are we doing our job properly? Should we be changing anything? Should we be doing anything differently to make sure that the services we're providing, the way we build stuff, the way we filter water, the way we site new infrastructure, like in areas that need to be around for another 30 years, are we doing those things right? And so we realized we needed a way to look at, to have an ongoing conversation with communities about what they were experiencing and to listen and to learn from them. And at the same time we started talking about this, there was something new starting to happen in the Alaska tribal health system. And that was, we were beginning to address the problem we had with this kind of patient visiting. It's very hard to have a doctor see every patient when people live 1,000 miles away on a remote village, and it's very hard to have the resources to send people to see their medical providers. So what's been developed is, thankfully, with the use of technology, which is very good timing that we have things like internet and cell service at the same time as we're having stuff like climate change go on. What happened was the service providers started to get out all over Alaska, and we started experimenting with telemedicine, which basically is somebody in a remote village with a camera talking to a patient, and on the other end, somewhere far away, is a specialist in Anchorage or Fairbanks or somewhere else. So we thought, it would be great if we could do this for environmental change and concerns that people have about the things that they're seeing happen in their community. The other kind of epiphany that came out of clinical care about climate change was that although, like this little kid right here, he's going to be able to have someone tracking his health his entire life, from the time he's a baby to the time he's an old man. And all of the different doctors and all of the different specialists and all of the different symptoms and treatment he received, it's all going to be compiled into one place in his chart. But we do community health. There is no chart for community health. So if someone comes in and they're working on air quality, or someone's working on the water system, or all of a sudden there's an outbreak of rabies or something else, where do we go to see all that information? How do we connect the dots and understand the long-term health of a community as opposed to a patient? And it was these combinations of things. It was people talking about really unusual things they were seeing and posting them on Facebook, which really isn't a good platform for archiving or searching, but it's great for what's happening right now. But we needed something for that. The ability to have access to technology all over Alaska, and now we're all around the Arctic in the place with cell service and smartphones and internet. And this recognition that, you know, the patient was changing really quickly and dealing with all kinds of different stressors, and we had to figure out a way to look at it comprehensively. So this is one of our patients. This is the community of St. George. It's probably one of the most remote communities in Alaska. It's out on the Pribilof Islands. But we wanted to find a way that we could provide a tool to a community like St. George so that the local residents could begin to share their knowledge through symptoms. And usually we don't call a symptom in a community, we usually call it, in Leo, we call it an event. So the idea is, if we were able to start crowdsourcing from people that were knowledgeable in their community, the types of unusual events, you know, it's not a sore elbow, it's an unusual fish, you know, that we're talking about. If we could compile all of those symptoms, we would be able to better understand what's happening. We could look for common symptoms in different communities, and maybe we could even, you know, come up with, you know, connect people with topical experts who's interested in what they're dealing with and could work with them. Oops, that's the wrong way. So yeah, a symptom, a physical or mental feature which is regarded as indicating a condition of disease, particularly such a feature that is apparent to the patient. So who is the knowledge keeper? Who is the local expert? Here, the doctor is listening to the patient, and he's probably telling him, what happened to your foot there, buddy? You know, so even though he's a little kid, he's the expert as far as his symptoms. The doctor's going to listen to those. He's going to record those in the chart, and then he might order up some tests. You know, we need to get you an X-ray or whatever. If Leo was a patient like this, if the Leo network was, it's the local people based on their experience who are the expert. The story that those local experts tell about the symptoms or the events that they're seeing is what we're recording. And what comes after that as far as testing, we call that monitoring in Leo. So we don't really get into the business of monitoring, but monitoring is really important because that's an important outcome. Whether it's, you know, taking additional samples of fish that have some kind of a disease, or, you know, installing some kind of a surveillance program for air quality, or just trying to hook up a community with a grad student or a academic institution where there's someone who works on their topic. That's the kind of technical support that we're trying to provide. So this right here, this was actually a picture that was shared on someone's cell phone at a statewide environmental conference back in like 2008 or 2009. And it was someone, they posted this to Facebook, and they said, we've never seen clouds like this before. We've never seen a extreme weather like this. Is that a tornado? What is it? And another community was talking about, we had never seen lightning before. Lightning is very rare in the Arctic, but they were starting to get more and more because of the temperatures. They were starting to get more lightning, which of course is a big driver for wildfire. So people were starting to see extreme weather events, and it was fascinating. You know, it's like, wow, where is this coming from? Does it have any bearing? Is it something that has relevance for health? We didn't know, but we figured out we had to start going out and listening to communities and documenting the kinds of changes that they were experiencing. So anyways, in the tribal health system, they asked us to set up a Center for Climate and Health with this goal to understand the effects of climate change, raise awareness, and encourage strategies that protect public health. This is in basic kind of in a One Health way. And what's come out of that are 3 different products. One is the Leo Network. Second is kind of an outreach tool called the Northern Climate Observer, which is a weekly newsletter. And then this One Health group, where actually we bring together every quarter people who are in the veterinary community, in the public health community, people who work on wildlife, people that work on environmental health. And we kind of go through the whole, by month, like what are the strong signals? What kinds of events have occurred? And is there any emerging threats that we need to pay attention to? How do we respond to how the environment is changing and the potential impacts on health? So, one of the big challenges in climate change is how do you gather information? And, people, this is a village of Nikolsky. It's way, way out on the Aleutian chain. And it has a population today of about 25 people. But they've been around, this community has been at the same location for over 4,000 years. And this is a place you could put, because there's infrastructure there, you could put a weather station or a climate station or a tide gauge. There's lots of different tech that you might be able to put there. But the tech that's maybe sometimes the most valuable and the hardest to get is people's local knowledge and experience of the changes that they are experiencing. So let's look at the map here at the north. I love this picture. This is National Geographic photo from a NASA satellite showing North America at night. And one thing that always strikes me when I see this is that Alaska has a lot more in common with Canada than it has with the lower 48 of the United States, and northern Canada in particular. And if you go way out, on one of these really isolated remote spots, this is where Nikolsky is, way out here on the Aleutian chain. And as I mentioned, there are people out there way out. There is a community out there. There is infrastructure, and there is a lot of knowledge, because archaeological remains from the Unungan go back 8,000 years. But this village in particular, constant occupation in North America of a community for over 4,000 years on the same spot. Why? Why were all these people have been living in the same location for so long? Well, one is accessibility. And if you look around northern Canada and Alaska and go back and look at historical or current tribal lands in British Columbia, you'll see that, if there's a river or if there's coastal access and it's a good hunting or fishing spot, there was a community there, and there probably still is. But the reason Nikolsky was where it is because it had this reef out in front on the ocean, but it also had this little creek. You see a little creek down there? So this creek has a fall run of silver salmon. And in the wintertime, when there's a storm, the ocean will throw up logs and sand and basically block off that creek. And if you don't manage it, it'll get more and more until it's basically impassable. So what's happened at this creek is for 4,000 years, people have been going out after every storm and they've been clearing away the trees and they've been pulling back the gravel so that when that high tide comes in, those silver salmon can make that little run up to the lake. So, you know, that relationship that this community has, you know, managing 400 yards of stream for 4,000 years to keep that salmon-human relationship going is kind of, you know, I think a real example of traditional knowledge. Knowing your environment so well that these really subtle changes in seasonality, in temperature, in the smell of the plants, in the feeling of the flesh of the fish, all of these things, you know, are very apparent to people that live in Nikolsky. They know change, they know the way their environment is supposed to be, and they know it changes. And frankly, for all people, people are really good at noticing change that when it happens. And so in Leo Network, we worked with communities like Nikolsky to develop the basic concept for the platform. But we wanted to make a platform that anyone who's really familiar with their place, whether it's their park, whether it's the mountain, whether it's you know, someplace where you work, wherever that is, if you're noticing unusual change, we want to be able to invite your knowledge and your ability, because these changes can be important and they can be significant, and they may even help us to understand, you know, the health challenges that are coming, and they may lead us back to some other part of the world. You know, maybe it's in Vancouver or Victoria or somewhere where you already know all about that topic. You know all about ticks and mule deer and that they are moving north and carrying these things. We've never even seen those things before, but they're coming. So we need to be able to reach out for your experience. So yeah, and this is a family in Nikolsky. When you live, you know, 1,000 miles away from Anchorage, you rely very heavily on the traditional foods. So food security is something that we're very tuned into. And, you know, what makes communities that are this remote viable is, you know, the same things that made them viable, you know, thousands of years ago. And that is really excellent places to harvest food. And those are the healthy foods when you live in places like this, because there's not a whole lot in the store. So anyways, we started with Leo. This is one of the first posts. It was about an EVU, which is a basically a storm surge of ice that destroyed a cottage near the village of Golovin in Alaska. We started to collect these different types of events that were happening. You know, lightning struck wildfires and downwind air quality changes. This is my son Carter. This is a stream that we fish on as for a family, have always fished on. This stream, that's a run of pink salmon. The stream ran out of water. You've probably seen the same thing happen in DC. It's a snow-fed stream. If you get to late August and September and the snow melts, there's nothing else to feed the stream, and all of a sudden you've got a whole bunch of fish coming in on the high tide, hanging in the pools, and then the water drains out and they're stuck. So this is, you know, a big change to the you know, marine ecosystem in South Central Alaska, and important for, you know, raises important questions about the sustainability of some watersheds. So here's our Center for Climate and Health, and these are the big things we're trying to figure out. And I'm going to get to Leo here in a second, but do changes in the climate have impacts, positive or negative, for the prevalence of acute disease like paralytic shellfish poisoning, or chronic disease like heart disease? Is it changing the kinds of injury or the timing of injuries that are occurring? Is it affecting communities' food security, either your ability to harvest, the safety of the food itself, or how confident you feel in providing the food to your family? Someone can tell you it's safe, but if you don't trust them, you might not eat it. Water security, can we build, is the lake safe, the river safe? Is it changing? And can we actually deliver it to the customer through a pipeline and treat it properly? And this one, which is really important, probably the first one on the top of the list, that is, how is change affecting people's behavioral health? And it can go both ways. And this is important to keep in mind, is that when you look through the health lens, climate change is not always bad. Sometimes it's good, but it's different. And we try to, recognize any positive outcomes along with any negative ones. How am I doing, Dave? Okay. So what did we do? People are saying, hey, all this crazy stuff happening, all around Alaska. Where do you start? Well, the way we started is we started visiting villages, and this is in the village of White Mountain, which is on northwest of Alaska. And we'd ask people, we have these talking circles, and we'd ask the question, are you noticing any unusual change? Can you do the same things on your birthday today that you used to be able to do on your birthday when you were a kid? How has that changed? What are some of the causes? And we thought we might find a few examples of, like, oh, that might be climate change. But what we actually found was, examples everywhere, and they affected all parts of health, chronic health, food security, water security. Is happening all over. And we realized, we were doing these, developing these reports to try to say type of impact, potential health effect. What we realized was this was no way going to be enough. What we had to do is have an active conversation happening with communities to hear what they were dealing with week to week, and then to try to connect them with other communities that might have experience, people that were experts on the topic, using it as a surveillance system and all that kind of stuff. So these are some of the priorities we recognized. We need knowledge systems that understand the people, environment, and wildlife and how they interact. We need good information about local and regional conditions. We need a system to identify emerging threats, a plan to respond quickly when key events occur, and collaboration between people from all kinds of different knowledge systems and expertise. So that's how Leo started. The really trying to provide an open space, where people could be sharing their knowledge respectfully across different knowledge systems to try to talk about specific events, something that is location specific and time specific, just like a symptom, location specific, happened last week. And then to start gathering these up, tagging them by community, so we'd be able to kind of break them down and understand the sequence, and if there's any real strong signals or big vulnerabilities. And we wanted to really make sure that both the traditional knowledge as well as the scientists had an open, even playing field and could really all work together. So there were some guidelines right from the very beginning of setting up this network, because a lot of people are very shy or nervous about sharing knowledge, and cautious. So we wanted to make sure it was respectful. We wanted to help guide people, all members, to the resources they need, make sure the information is accessible, to be respectful. You know, super important now in the world of like everything that's happening with social media, to have something that people feel they can put content into, they'll be able to see it, but also it's protected, and make it inclusive. And this was sort of the way we looked at it. All of these of equal importance: local knowledge. I'm thinking of, you know, a fishing family from Nova Scotia that's been there for 100 years and know those waters like the back of their hand. Indigenous communities, like some of the ones we spoke about here, with totally different types of knowledge systems, but real familiarity with what's happening in the environment, and science. Can we pull all these together? We figure that's a winning combination to be able to address climate change. So the first sort of early adopters were tribal environmental, kind of like rangers, tribal environmental managers. We have these in communities all over Alaska. Here we're looking at a thaw-related eroding bank in the village of St. Michael. What they were actually saying is, when we were driving down here, is this is the first time they've been able to drive this stretch of beach in about 15 years. Because you see all that rock on the right? That's armor rock that was installed to protect the end of their airlift strip where the planes came in from erosion. And what happened is the erosion had just backed away from the original armor rock. And so they were saying, you know, this is kind of cool. We haven't been able to drive down here for years, and now we get to go drive all the way around the village on the beach. But they also recognized it's a big problem, and the smaller the airstrip gets, the smaller the airplanes that you can fly into the community. But I could go through this and show you like some of these. These are slides talking about how LEO works. Maybe I will just briefly. So in the system, the system recognizes people. That's what the network's made out of. So everyone gets their own profile, and they get their own map, and they get to track who they interact with if they're adding content into the system. And usually a post starts with a primary observer, and it then engages different people who are consultants to work with them. To try to be respectful of this kind of knowledge, and to provide a way to cite this type of information sharing, we came up with just like a scientific paper citation where the observer is the first author and these people are contributing authors, and that's the way it's cited on the site. But communities also have a presence. So just as anything that you add to your own, that you contribute to the system gets recognized, so does thing that anyone adds about a community is going to be recognized as well. And we try to add in some of these other resources that are community focused, because sometimes there's a lot of information out there, but it's hard sometimes to find the stuff about your place. And so you can see that, you can see the number of members if you go to a community page, and you see this sort of sequence of events that happened. And you also, of course, have the maps. You can also break out from the maps, these, sort of the specifications or the detailed breakout of the categories. So for this community, there's only a few posts in there, but what we would say is Kivalina is recording observations showing extreme weather is their top vulnerability, and also ocean and sea change and changes in the behavior or health of marine mammals and fish. And here's an example of this is an example of a LEO observation. So at the very beginning, we started by just putting news articles into LEO about specific events. You know, somebody saw something happen or some kind of event occurred in the community. And then later we started to add the ability for people to add their own events, because of course there aren't newspapers everywhere and there's a lot of stuff going on. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes of LEO, is this sort of symptomatic information, these observations. We now have a new platform that is going to go online probably while your class is going on, which is going to include what we call information posts. So it might not be about the too much rain that Jana Mitchell is reporting here, but it might be about what we understand about rain and precipitation during the summer of 2017, which is important for this post, but it's not going to go on the map as an event. I'm just going to pop. So you see, get your longitude and latitude. If it's an actual observation, that information is collected. This is a example of a profile showing the contributions that this person has put in the system and 3 of their collaborators. I'm just going to pop through these quickly, just showing the kind of variety of people that sometimes consult on an individual post. So where we help is to try to facilitate that. The system also has a presence for organizations. I could pull this up for Royal Roads. That would be fun to do in a minute. And you can see all the people from Royal Roads that have joined LEO. And as far as your own information, we try to be respectful of that as well. So this is Katie Spellman. She's a professor of botany at UAF. And she does a lot of work with phenology. You can see where she's from. You can see where she works. But the only way to contact her is like a Craigslist kind of messaging service. And here's Katie's maps. So all of her stuff rolls into, whether she's posting an observation or consulting or just sharing an article, it'll go into her profile. So I think, boy, I've almost gone on for an hour. I feel like I should jump into the platform now for a minute, Dave.
Sure. That's a cute little mammal there.
Yeah, well, that.
Oh my God, what happened? Got a buckshot shot at him?
Well, no, that's hair loss syndrome.
Oh my.
So this is a huge event that happened all across northern Canada and Alaska. You know, a few years ago, people had all kinds of questions about what that means. People thought it was maybe related to Fukushima, and other people thought it was related to harmful algal blooms. We're still not completely sure. But the point was, many different places were reporting these kinds of events. And this is where the connecting the dots comes in, where maybe it's bigger than just one community, maybe something else is going on. And so this is how we are, through these individual observations and sharing of knowledge, hopefully we're contributing to something that will help people in Alaska, Canada, other places understand these kinds of phenomena that are occurring. Another example, bird die-offs is a big issue for food security right now in the Arctic. You know, we see these 2 different observations coming in. They're in different years, but it does raise questions. We have been looking closely at harmful algal blooms. And what we try to do is refer people back to, we're kind of a catch-all, but we try to refer the observations themselves and the people back to organizations that have capacity and really look at this stuff closely. And as I mentioned, we look at, these are important too. News articles are super important because they capture a lot of what's going on. And so we'll take those kinds of news stories, and there's a way easily you can put them into LEO and share that kind of, those kinds of events. Just looking back at some of our past stuff. This is a stats view this is actually observations in Alaska in 2019. We can really see what some of the strong signals are. So here related to surface water, death diaphragm decline in the ocean. Why do we have those three topics as being the most common observations posted? Well, that was the first year when we started to see really high river temperatures and systemic die-offs of salmon in a whole bunch of different river systems across northern Alaska and BC. But I think BC predates this. You guys could have probably told us this was coming years ago. Another example, someone in a community, saw visually what you're seeing in this picture, which is that there's something weird in the coloration of the water. They then performed algal sampling using microscopy. They couldn't see anything unusual in there, but it was there. And we were able to then pull in satellite imagery and show how that bloom expanded, over the course of days. So that's another sort of the surveillance part, is trying to provide communities with a heads up when there's some kind of a developing event, which might be important for their own subsistence harvest and things like that. And then what we do is, this is the One Health group. We meet quarterly, people from CDC, we get people participating from Yukon and BC as well. We all look at these events. We try to, share notes about what's going on and look about if there's any collaborations for what we should be doing for surveillance or education, testing, all those kinds of things. Okay. So here's a couple of the take-homes. In a rapidly changing north, developing effective strategies to monitor environmental change is important. Applying One Health is critical for places where people live close to the land. Local observations can be used to understand emerging threats. And LEO is a platform for using local observations to describe unusual events, identify trends, and to encourage dialogue between different knowledge systems. And we focus on the symptoms, And by collecting symptoms of change, we can understand local and regional vulnerabilities and develop health strategies for adaptation. So that's it. Just a little nod to all the people you guys included who are joining LEO.
Awesome. Great presentation.
And if you want, take a quick look here. Just a couple of things you might, going across the top panel here. These are action buttons. So you can go ahead and you can explore, which is basically shortcuts to different sort of preset searches. Search by season, search by time period, search by topic, follow what's happening near you, or actions as far as submitting. So submit your own observation or submit a news article. And then who's in the system? Well, it's a people network. Everything's behind a firewall to try to protect privacy. And we do have this little thumbnail approach. You can kind of search this way by members. But I'm going to show you something that's kind of behind the curtain here. You could also search by community. This is where there are members now located in LEO. It's amazing to me every time I turn this on, because when it's on a website, things just go crazy and people join. But let's just look at a community here. This is the community of Wales. It's got 4 members. And you can click in here. As a member, you can see this, and you can see who these members are and look at some of the kinds of things that are going on in this community. And if you want, you can drill in a little deeper. You can refine your search by topic, by date, You could back it off and just look at all of Alaska, or you could look at British Columbia, for example. And you can also, I just want to see observations, or I just want to see news articles. So that's the search options. But the views, for just the data we have about whales, I'm going to do a little bigger search, I think. This is a little bit too small. So let's just look at one of the things that's been kind of a hot topic recently has been unusual wildlife events in Canada. So I'm going to do an advanced search and look at land mammals. Hope that goes. I'm kind of getting blocked here with this. Okay. For some reason, I can't seem to get down to the bottom of my screen to hit. Let's see if I can move this up. Oh, there we go. Apply. And then any date. Let's just go anywhere. Let's just go in the past year. And let's view by map. So these are land mammal related events, unusual land mammal behavior. If we just go to past month. Let's go back further than that. Let's go. Here we go. So this is kind of the interesting thing we've been following over the past few weeks is lots of unusual, in particular, lynx events. And apparently there's not enough rabbit to go around, but we're also wondering about whether there's other health things going on with the lynx. This one was in northern BC.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Right? But going back to the view options in here, if you want to do a presentation or you want to do some, take this to a class or something like that, you can look at the list, you can look at the map, you can look at the thumbnails for image inventory, and then down here you can look at the stats. So on this topic area, where did it happen in the natural environment? Well, it was happening to land mammals. What type of unusual events were they? Mostly unusual animal behavior. They're not die-offs, they're just unusual behavior. And what are the impacts on the human environment? Safety, pets, health, which all seems to make sense. And then you can also look at a timeline if you want to sort of see, the whole sequence of these events, how they've been occurring. So that's kind of the search and contribution piece. You'll only find stuff in here now on the site. You're only going to find stuff that are sort of symptoms. And the reason we do that is because we want to put them in a timeline like a patient and see what sort of sequence of symptoms have occurred. Because quite often they'll tell a story. It's warmer, raining in the middle of winter, permafrost thaw, erosion, lake drains, the power lines falling over the coastline. All these things kind of happening in sequence, and we want to be able to help communities kind of make their case for what's happening. But pretty soon, you can see here in library, this might be, yep, this is going to be out pretty soon. It's going to show all the information articles. And if your class assignment doesn't qualify as an event, that's okay. It might be really great as an informational piece, just sort of raising awareness about a topic, and I think that could be a home for it. So we'd like to see your, obviously like to see your events, and we also like to see what you have to contribute as far as information articles. The last thing, I mean, one thing is you can translate all the content in here super easily. We hope at least you can. So if this article, which came in Norwegian, we want to make sure people in different parts of the world can share information. So we're tied in to Google Translate to try to take a news article that's only available in Norwegian, that was submitted by a Norwegian member because they thought it was important, and make sure it's available in English and French and other languages too. But the other thing is this right here, I think, is a really important tool. It's called My Maps. You can go in here and you can create your own map. You name it and describe it. So and then you can decide whether you want the map to be private or available with a link or private. You can add posts into it, any post you want into Leo. Let's say you're doing a project on algal blooms and marine mammal strandings, and you want to compile that information. You can go ahead and put whatever you want in there, and you can add your own data points. So you can be combining your research, your monitoring with content that's sort of event related. And then you can decide who you want to share it with. You can add people that are in Leo, or you can add other people if you want to. So I'm making maps in here all the time. And this is looking at drought during the summer of 2019. But once you have your map made, I mean, you can continue to add to it if you want, but you can go ahead and pull the data out of it. All the data is accessible. And also, if you want to just do a slideshow, it's ready to go for a slideshow. So we really appreciate people that add even, news articles. There's like something important happening in my community that should be in Leo. We love that. We love it if you guys have your own observations that you want to contribute to try to capture the changes that are happening. We work closely with First Nations Health Authority in BC. They're also very involved and have a Leo program. And for people that are topic experts or local experts, they know an area really well, we really love to be able to connect you with people so that you can, have a conversation and compare your knowledge and share your knowledge. So that's kind of my Leo network overview. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. That was awesome. Folks, any questions? So, I mean, I can give just a couple ideas. So I've explained to Mike where we're at with stuff, and we've gone through this before, explain the assignment. So the assignment is, in part focused on our course, which is delving into the realm of social and ecological systems and the theory and of resilience and so forth, and all the literature that goes along with that. So the assignment itself is a little obviously meant to draw on that kind of thinking. Not necessarily, we don't want essays on resilience theory and caterpillar outbreaks on the Leo platform necessarily. But what we do want, though, is to take the observations that you've done and tweak them a bit if they're requiring that, and then hopefully create an acceptable observation that will bring value to the overall platform to do as exactly what Mike was saying, which is to give us more of these data points and observational insights that can perhaps be used to better understand what's going on with environmental change in the community, whether it be today or in the past even. So that's what we're trying to do with the assignment. So I'll kind of hand it off to the folks that are on the platform to see if you have any questions about what you've seen so far, and then what our next steps are. Our next steps are, I'm going to get you back what you've submitted as an assignment, and then we're going to tweak it and put it in, Leo observation format, which is a bit more of a condensed version of what you've submitted, but very similar. So any questions, everybody? What do you think? Do you like it? I think it was an awesome presentation. I want to go to Alaska now. Never been.
Come on up.
Questions? Do y'all see how this is going to fit together now? I think it was, to me, it makes a lot more sense, especially seeing kind of the accounts of communities. Okay, here we got Sarah. What's the difference between blue and gray dots?
Okay, that's a good question. Let's take a quick look. So I'm so glad you asked that question. Okay, so let's see. The blue dots on the main screen, if you do a search, like let's look for permafrost. Okay, on the main screen, when you first go on the platform, they all are the same color. But when you go into a more advanced search, they break out into two colors. The blue one, this is an actual first-person observation. Like this guy actually saw this happen. And this is usually how it starts. Someone sees something, take a picture. That's really, it doesn't, and observations don't have to be long. This one is only a paragraph. If someone sees something and then they send it into the platform. So don't feel like you intimidated to share, even if you're not sure if it's unusual or not, that's okay. We'll try to help you answer that question if we can. The gray dots are newspaper articles. So if you go onto the platform, anyone can see the news articles because they're already out there in the public domain. But you have to be a member to see the observations, the first-person observations. And this largely for privacy is the reason we do that. We don't want to have everybody, if they don't want to be exposed to like their image popping up on Google or whatever it might be. But the common denominator, whether it's a blue dot or a gray dot, is it's about an event that happened.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that.
Awesome. I got another comment here. Is from Jason, and it's a good point. In fact, it was something that I wanted to kind of throw out there on the table for us to just riff on for a bit. Is Jason's comment: the Leo network is a great concept. In order to see trends, there needs to be a multitude of data, for sure. And so for those who are online that have worked at all in environmental impact assessment or studied it, you'll know that cumulative effects assessment or cumulative effects is increasingly, it's been in the legislation for a while, but always something that's done pretty darn poorly. Like say we need to do cumulative effects assessment, and then you're like, well, we don't have any data. It's like, okay, well, we think there might be some stuff, and very seldom have I seen good cumulative effects studies. Like they usually have been studies that have been done by research institutes or something like that. Very seldom, if ever, as part of an actual environmental impact assessment. And one of the great things about this platform is that this at least starts that ball rolling. And in some cases, you probably get enough, like even that links, all those links, stories or observations could contribute to some sort of understanding of, maybe I don't know, who knows what's contributing to that. Maybe it's a temperature change thing. I don't know, but you can't really get at those as far as Jason is saying, those kind of trends or community trends without having multiple data points over space and preferably over time as well. Mike, have you had, okay, Jessica, question. Fabulous presentation, thank you. I lost a connection, please apologize. Is there anyone besides yourself actively monitoring reports for trends? Are many researchers using Leo as a source of data? That's Jessica's question.
Well, I think it's like the point brought up by the previous commenter, and that is we didn't really realize what we could do as far as looking at cumulative impacts and trends until recently, because there just wasn't enough content in the system. It's, you know, and of course it gets better the more we put in there, but yeah, it was originally started as someone reports something and we're going to try to, you know, be aware of what they're experiencing and connect them with a technical consult. That's really the basis for the system. You know, I see this fish doesn't look right. It's got some kind of a growth on it. We take that and we send it to the fish and wildlife people, and they say it's probably this kind of you know, a mold, and it's safe to eat or it's not, you know. So it's only recently we've been trying to like roll up data. So this is 525 posts from British Columbia. So what's the strongest type of event? It's about ocean and sea change and fish and weather. So, you know, these would be what we would consider strong signals. Is it a trend? I don't know, but it's certainly interesting and maybe can guide us to ask some questions. I think the hope is that the membership will start to make their own maps and do their own analysis and be able to start applying their own knowledge and asking their own questions. I think we'll get there someday.
Yeah, if I may add to that, like if I look at this from kind of more of a research standpoint, and say if there were like, I don't know, a bunch of observations of tick, diseases that came from ticks, like Lyme disease, right? Because that's one of the ones that's attributed to ticks. It's getting more airtime these days. And there's a lot, like say a good like 20, 25 or something like that in a certain region over a couple of years. I mean, that to me is then fodder for a hypothesis. You know, I look at that and go, well, I hypothesize that we're getting warmer summers, maybe. That's just, I'm just pulling out of the air. And we got to look at that, you know, and then based on those instances, like a doctor, you're looking at kind of these symptoms of a rash, but in this case, it's tick-borne diseases. Then you'd start to kind of do the analysis that could perhaps support that, right? So whether it's using climate models or whatever you need to use, but that's the starting point for it. Okay, so we've got another question here. Awesome presentation, thank you. Could we use some of the info we've learned today and samples from the website when we discuss with others, like our consults for the assignment? Sure, yeah, why not? So Mike, as part of the assignment, it's to do an observation, explain it in the context of some of the stuff that we're working on, but also identify potential consults, potential experts. I mean, I know there's a network of experts already existing in the system, but then I've asked to identify for those specific observations and ideally reach out to them to get their input on the observation. Like I'm thinking of one which is you know, tree health in Montreal, and then the tree falls, one I've just been looking at before this. And one of the consults was a grounds person, like person who works on grounds technician, and a professor in meteorology or climatology at McGill. So yeah, I mean, that's what we have to work with as observation. Those consults could serve as, I guess, how would it work for that? If one of those consults gives a pretty good explanation, would they be invited to be like an expert on the system, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that formal, really. I mean, yeah. You know, you become an expert when you consult on something. Yeah. You know, you don't really become an expert. You become credited for a consult.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and it could be that your knowledge is about a place. It could be your knowledge is about a topic. Mm-hmm. Now, the only difference, sometimes we have people that were like, you know, someone says, this is the best person at this agency, send it to them.
Yeah.
And we send it to them and they provide some really good feedback. And we go ahead and we put that in the body of the consult, but they don't, for whatever reason, want to be a member or anything. That's okay. We just put their name at the bottom as stated by such and such, just like you would in a paper.
Yep.
If they do choose to join Leo, then we can credit them in a little bit more formal way, like we do, where you actually have their image and all that kind of stuff for their little box. And of course, the data runs into their format. So sometimes it takes a while before people do join, and then, you know, and sometimes they don't, and that's okay.
Okay.
But we want to make sure they're credited either way, just as if you share a photo or you share knowledge, we want to make sure that we have the rights to use that. We want to make sure it's, you know, we know who took the photo, we know we have permission to use it.
Awesome. Yeah, so there we go. Any other questions? So, I mean, this is the exciting part, because now that we've kind of gotten rolling heavy into the course, you know, we can start to, you know, hopefully have a real contribution to this platform. So there we go. So if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to give a heartfelt thank you to Mike for your time and explaining to us how this all works in more detailed format, and also the new stuff that's come online, which is great. I think that's going to be a great addition, the news and info platform. That's going to be a really nice layer to put onto this as well. So, and we will start then timeline over the next week, 2 weeks, shooting some potential observations, whether they be on as first person observations or information posts to you. Now, are we going to put those as part of the RRU kind of community or group? Do you want to stick to that model? I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so what I'll do is if I see anything come in through our channel, I'll forward it into your hub.
Yeah.
And then if it comes in and you guys are working on it already, you know, hard copy, email, whatever, that's fine too. Just, we won't really do anything until we see something coming back, submitted, sort of final.
Okay.
So, you know, if I see something and I send it back to you, and then Dave, you say, I think we're submitting that one for publication.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, okay, we'll approach it that way.
Awesome. Okay. Good. All right. Well, there's another question here. I think that's it. Oh, here we go. Shona, thank you very much for the presentation of the platform. I think it will provide invaluable insights. Great. Thank you, Shona. Good stuff. All right. Just to let you know, Mike, we also, as part of this course, is just in my general teaching, we do a weekly live interactive podcast every Tuesday at 6 p.m. PST, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I've started to invite speakers on. So I'll send you the link to that, and feel free to kind of share it. It's open and free, so done like this. But what I've invited some pretty cool folks. Tomorrow we have a colleague of mine from University of Victoria, Dr. Katya Rhodes, and she's an environmental economist who works on climate change policy, and she analyzes kind of the economics and political implications of good, bad, mediocre climate policy, and then also the evaluation of politically insincere and politically sincere politicians, all within that. Here's the good policy, and then, you know, what does the policy mean in the context of how it's delivered? She's really good. So she'll be on tomorrow. I'll send you a link to that, and you can just feel free to share that throughout your network, and we'll have some other good folks. We'll have some other good folk coming down the pipe. One of my favorites is going to be on May 18th. One of my former professors, who used to be the director for Environment Canada, Director General for Environment Canada, Western Canada, Dr. Jim McTaggart-Cowan. I don't know if you heard of Jim. He's quite famous. And he did a lot of like environmental policy for Western Canada. And so he's going to be on the May 18th. And Jim's the kind of guy that the gloves come off pretty quick when it comes to, like, you know, debating climate stuff, because he dealt with all the climate deniers and all the bad guys back in the day. So he'll be on the 18th. It'll be a good show, that one.
Oh, that sounds like required podcasting for me. Just
yeah, it's
get an ear on what's going on in BC, and to hear you guys what you're talking about. That's right down my alley. So definitely send it to me.
All right, good stuff. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, Dave. Thanks, everybody.
We'll be in touch. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.